Sekeres Price for Friday, July 19th, 2024. We're coming to you from the Nation Network studio built by Arbor Lee here at the iconic Wall Center in downtown Vancouver. And if you're looking for your next meeting space, contact the Wall for all your event needs. Sales at wallcenter.com. Matt Sekeres alongside Blake Price, Grady Sass hitting switches, conducting things. Big show coming up for you. And we will start with our poll question today as we focus in on Canucks winger Brock Boeser, the longest tenured Vancouver Canuck, coming off a career season of 40 goals, and asking you quite simply, why are you looking at me like that?
I just, you're speaking so eloquently. I'm just in awe.
Good answer. Does Brock Boeser score 40 goals again next season? Yes or no? You can vote at the Sekeres and Price X.com and YouTube accounts. Makes me nervous when he looks at me like that. Look, I voted no. I understand that Tocchet is in the process of a deep dive and potentially going to loosen the reins here on the Canucks and their system. Not to mention finding ways to generate more chances off the rush. Not that Brock is a sublime skater that you think of scoring off the rush, but I think that would help as well. The shooting percentage was awfully high last year for Boeser. Let's remember, he had a 4-goal game to springboard the 40-goal campaign. He had some droughts as well, and we have become accustomed to that. But he shot 19.8% last year. 1 of every 5 shots went in the net. He's a career 13.8%.
Which is still very
shooter,
good.
Which is very, which is very good. And there's been several. His rookie year, second year was in the 16%. Of course, there's always an injury concern with Brock. Sadly, the blood clot issue that kept him out of Game 7 of the second round series against Edmonton, but the previous injuries. And I mean, I would suspect that you're going to see more scoring from whomever is on the wing with Elias Pettersson, Jake DeBrusk, and somebody else. So I voted no. I wouldn't be surprised to see him get to 40 goals, but I think 30 to 40 is more his speed going forward.
Yeah, 40 seems gaudy. He seems like a 33 goal scorer to me. It's sort of as we watch him.
That's awfully precise.
Yeah,
just like the symmetry of 33.
Yeah, I just feel 30 feels shy. 35 feels like too much.
Okay, good answer. 2 good answers here. You're off to a hot start.
Professional talker, so it does come with the territory. I don't think people should be disappointed though if that's what he is. But the start's going to be interesting.
No, of course, that's a very good hockey player.
Yeah.
There are very few players in the league that are going to get to that total of goals.
Look what Jake DeBrusk just signed for.
Yeah.
He's not a 33 goal scorer.
No, never has been.
No. So if that's him, that's it. But the first 2 months, like watching Brock Boeser score or lack thereof, perhaps in October and November, is really going to be an interesting study in how the fans then cheer him on. Not in terms of the game-to-game cheering on, but I mean in terms of the next contract. Are the fans saying, hey, pay the man? Or are the fans saying, do not pay the man? Depending on how he starts.
More on that in a second. I am seeing some in the replies. General Zad said, voting no as well because he's getting to 50.
Oh,
Look,
wow. Okay.
There is a world where he can improve on 40.
Never say never.
Exactly. He's a smart hockey player. He may get more opportunities power play wise next season because, of course, we'll be shifting that up a little bit. It's possible that Pettersson's line draws more of the tougher defensive matchups going forward because of the presence of Jake DeBrusk. So I understand the optimism in some quarters. I understand, we say this a lot, but I'm not sure there's a player that Canucks Nation roots for more because of Brock and getting to know his story and the sympathy we have for the young man as he watched his dad battle cancer and then eventually pass away. We feel like we know the Boeser family. So, yeah, I can understand all of the optimism. Now, I do think the Vancouver Canucks have made the correct decision that they're not going to talk contract extension with him this summer. He is eligible, but I do think if you're the Canucks, if you're Rutherford and Alvin, first of all, you don't really want to negotiate off a 40 goal a year. Secondly, you can always try to negotiate in season, and we saw that last year, even against the objections of Elias Pettersson. They insisted on negotiating in season. Of course, if he doesn't get to 40 or doesn't look like he's going to get to 40, then maybe you save some money on the contract. And I do think there's a big decision awaiting Boeser, because I do think the Canucks are going to approach that in terms of, are you willing to go hometown discount for the only franchise you've ever known with a bunch of people that you now consider close friends and allies in a city that you love, all of those different things. Not to mention to try and forge a Stanley Cup champion hockey team. As we know, in a cap world, every dollar counts. So I think they've made the right call.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I also think there's a world where you may have to trade Boeser. Whether that's in season, whether that's his rights next year, if you don't feel like you're going to get a deal done. You do wonder, he's got such affection for his home state of Minnesota. Of course, that's where the family's based. And would anybody blame him if he wanted to go home to play hockey now and be closer to his mom and his siblings and all? So, yeah, it's going to be a very interesting year, I think, for Brock Boeser.
How many times do we see contending teams with UFAs to be say, need to hold on to him, because he's going to help us in the playoffs, et cetera, et cetera. And then the guy just walks. Sometimes you win.
But sometimes
Sam Reinhart signed. Sam Reinhart stayed and signed with the team that he won the Stanley Cup with. That probably helped that he won the Stanley Cup. But a lot of other teams, they roll the dice and they say,
yeah. Well, I mean, there's also, you don't like losing assets for nothing. But if Boeser is a part of a Canucks team that makes the conference final or the Stanley Cup final next year, you can probably live with that a little bit more.
If you're hanging around in third in the division at Christmas, do you make a preemptive trade? If you don't like the way things are going, and you have to really see how it all plays out, how you're doing, how the negotiations are going, and how the players playing, right? All that will dictate how you feel at that point.
So look, winger was a position of weakness for them last year. And so as we stand right here and now, would you consider redeploying the money you have in Boeser for a second pair right side defenseman? Probably not, because that's robbing Peter to pay Paul. But if DeBrusk and Heinen really turn out, maybe you feel better about your situation on the wing. Maybe you feel like you've got a bridge to Lekkerimäki, and that you look at similar moves as they made a couple of years ago, where deep at center, really threadbare on the right side on defense, Horvat out, Filip Hronek in. A move that improved the hockey club. Of that, there's no doubt.
Mm-hmm.
So, look, all these sort of machinations, and of course, with the salary cap, it's a big jigsaw puzzle, right? The leg bone's connected to the hip bone. So we'll see how they go about it. But I think it's the right call to not talk extension in the here and now. And that may cost them a little bit on the cap, because Boeser goes out and has another good year, and of course with another expected increase in the salary cap, it may well cost you more to re-sign Boeser next summer or towards next summer than it does right now. I think that's a risk worth taking. Stupid me.
Yeah.
Wrong answer. 2 good answers, 1 bad answer. 10 minutes in. Okay, if you're keeping score at home. And in fact, I will. Yesterday, Grady says to me, Matt, after that Puckpedia tweet about a 23-player roster coming within $166,000 of the salary cap, and that has been a hallmark of Rutherford and Alvin the last couple of years. 2 years ago, they got awfully close to setting it right on the limit. And then last year they were dollar perfect. And all the cap guys were like, we've been waiting for this. It's the immaculate roster. So looking at the 23 player roster and Puckpedia's calculation that it's within 166,000 of the cap, and that's inclusive of Tucker Pullman. That accounts for the injured defenseman who's going to go on LTIR. Grady says to me, I think you ought to talk about, whether or not this is it, whether or not the roster is set, and that we're not going to see anything like last year where Pius Suter was added in August and where we saw all these trades in training camp. And I just completely skipped over it yesterday. I think he even put it in our show title, and I just missed it. So early E&O on me. What do you think? You think this is it? Do you think that's that? They're done?
I think they've got two paths, right? I think they will continue to look to do a number of things. Sign a player that perfectly accommodates for Tucker Pullman's overage.
So
on
replace
LTIR.
someone you're looking at right now so that would be Di Giuseppe, I would think then, right? That's a guy who's $166,000 more expensive than Phil Di Giuseppe.
No, I'm saying you can sign right now a $2.5 million player.
You can go over the cap in the offseason by 10%.
But you can go over the cap once you've got to the regular season as well to accommodate for Tucker Pullman at 2.5. Like Tucker Pullman's on the roster there as a 23.
Yeah.
So you can replace Tucker Pullman's money. So there's three things that they can do with this situation. They just go as is. They sign somebody to effectively Tucker Pullman's money and be fully stretched out into LTIR, or they try and trade Tucker Pullman's contract and then either fill that gap or keep that gap for further use in the middle of the season. We'll see.
Yeah. So scenario one, where you just upgrade on Di Giuseppe, you're looking at a player who comes in the $930,000 range.
Well, no, you can spend up to Tucker.
No, I understand that, Blake, but I'm just saying, again, they have cut rosters to within a couple $100,000 or spot on the number the last couple of years. So if we're working off that premise, I understand there are other routes and premises available here. But let's say it's someone just more expensive than Di Giuseppe. You're willing to put Di Giuseppe on waivers and see if he clears and goes down to Abbotsford. Honestly, Blake, that could be really good because that pushes Vasily Podkolzin. That means further competition there in training camp. You know how coaches love that internal competition at training camp. And it gives you another card to play who, let's face it, I would suspect would be a different profile of player than Podkolzin or Di Giuseppe.
Is Sammy Blais down to $1 million player?
Like a shout like that, yes.
Is he down to $1 million player?
I don't know. Is he still available?
He's still available.
Yeah. He's a shift disturber, as we know. And last year, if I'm not mistaken, there was a little bit of regret. Yeah, there was a lot of regression there. He was down to 7 points in 53 games.
7 points.
7 points.
So
yes,
he might be a $1 million player.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And of course, there's slim pickings on the UFA market. But, as keen observers of NHL off seasons will tell you, there's usually a bargain or two, past the first flight of free agency. A guy who winds up being a nice little cog on a good price for a playoff team.
Well, which that was 7 points in 53 games, by the way. But it's off of a 20 point in 31 game campaign the year before with the Blues when he was acquired. Which is he? Is he 20 points in 31 games? Because that's a different player than 7 points in 53 games.
Yeah. Boy, we're getting a lot of response on this Boeser. And I'm not surprised. Jeff and I were out at Northlands yesterday, and incidentally, look at this Northland shirt. New gear from Northlands. Is that not a sharp looking shirt?
It's like a tour shirt.
Yeah. And the starter comes up to Jeff and I. It was, hey, so they're not re-signing Boeser, huh? DB on Twitter. Need to sell high and trade Brock. Yes, he gets his goals and points, but he is an elite game-changing player, and he's a slow skater. Forgot to mention that. Brock is a high IQ hockey player. I think we've come to learn that. We saw that in his rookie season. Even defensively as well. He's okay defensively. And a lot of that is because he thinks the game so well, anticipates.
Scott on YouTube says 50.
Yeah.
Most others are saying at least 30.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think at least 30 is the baseline now, right? Like anything short of 30 would be awfully disappointing and probably mean the Vancouver Canucks don't come close to.
How about this theory, though?
But you do have to wonder if you're Rutherford and Alvin. The league gets quicker every year. Brock, as we know, is not an explosive skater. How will he age?
Gave 16 power play goals for Brock Boeser. How many of those become Jake DeBrusk goals?
Well, and that's a great question because who's playing the bumper spot? How are you arranging the chess pieces on that first power play unit?
Now, of course, all totals can go up if the power play just gets out of sight. So if you're a top 5 power play.
And Blake, power play was pretty awful. Second part of
middling for sure.
Yeah. I mean, there were a lot of goals left out there that maybe Boeser was closer to 45 if the power play was going a little better.
Yeah.
In the last couple of months of the year.
Yeah. So the total of power play goals last year doesn't have to just be redistributed to the group. You can get more. You can go get more power play goals. That is allowed.
Right. No, it is allowed.
But it's still ultimately there's ultimately a cap because there's only one puck out there.
Mm-hmm. Let's get to our top story brought to you by Yellow Dog Brewing, Neighborhood Brewing. Yellow Dog Spirits, Foolish Winery. Had a wonderful day on the golf course yesterday with Brad McDonald of Yellow Dog.
Good company.
I played horribly, and he's such a good fella that he decided to join me.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Sure
misery loves company, and so Brad and I yesterday played some horrible golf, but had fun doing so, as we always do on a beautiful day at Northlands. Hot as can be, Blake, but a nice little breeze that just kept things, Our top story. After 252 days, 36 weeks, 8.5 months, the longest tenured British Columbia Lion, defensive back TJ Lee, will make his return Sunday in Calgary off an Achilles injury suffered in the West Final. You remember how heartbreaking the West Final was in Winnipeg last November for the BC Lions. Not only did they not get over the Winnipeg hump for a second year in a row, but they watched two beloved and terrific players in TJ Lee and Keon Hatcher suffer Achilles injuries. A couple weeks ago, we saw TJ was back at practice. It's his 10th season with the Lions, 136 CFL games, including postseason. And we wondered, look at this. This is a little early. Usually about 9 months plus. I mean, that's typically the early end. So he's a half month at minimum, a couple weeks ahead of schedule. He'll be back in there at halfback Sunday against the Stampeders. Manny Rugamba is going to sit down. He's got a knee injury, hasn't practiced all week. I suspect he'll be tested. I mean, Dave Dickinson is a pretty sharp knife on the other side. They tested Rugamba last week, Saskatchewan. So I imagine that Dave Dickinson, the Stampeders, will test him. And as we know, TJ at his best is an all-star level player. Really pleased. We've had a lot of occasions over the years, Blake, because he's been there so long to talk to TJ on the show back when we used to go and do the show tableside at practice. He's been a veteran and a leader for this team for a long time. And so very pleased to see him back in the fold and back on the playing field on Sunday.
I'm disappointed that we have to wait till Sunday for this game because we've had a really lean week of sports action.
Well, and I saw a few people, and Arash Madani of Sportsnet Forefront criticized the CFL for, wait a second, you went we're doing a game Thursday through Sunday all summer, most of the summer.
The driest week.
And the week of the baseball all-star game, when you know there's no Thursday games, you don't have
that's a good point. It's a good point.
Like
maybe nobody had availability. I don't know.
Like you saw their leagues take advantage of this. Caitlin Clark, the WNBA, and she set an assist record.
Yeah.
I heard our friend Mr. Halford talking that he thought the Philadelphia Union playing that 14-year-old player and setting the youngest mark, youngest player to ever play an MLS mark, may well have been ticketed to this week to get some
grab a headline.
Yeah, headlines and news for the MLS. The CFL didn't take advantage. And I got to say, as much as I like the idea of a game all 4 days, the Sunday late afternoon game is the one I'm probably least likely to watch.
Yeah. Yeah, because you're trying to eke the last few minutes of a sunny weekend.
Mm-hmm.
Can be a little bit distracting. 4 p.m. Yeah.
Like Friday Night Football is a staple. I like the Thursday night games. I know they have been great for attendance here, better in other markets, but I like the Thursday night game. I like to be able to sit down and watch a game Thursday, Friday, Saturday. Of course, you're going Saturday. Sunday. Here's the other thing. If you played at midday Sunday, I might be more inclined. I mean, it's somewhat weather dependent, but anyways, Sunday in Calgary against the Stampeders for your BC Lions, 5-1, best team in the West, best record in the league.
Is Wally being feted at this game?
Wally is being feted at this game. More on Wally in a second. Just let me get to this. They're holding out hope for slot back Javon Couture. He hasn't practiced all week with a rib injury, but at best he's going to be questionable, more likely doubtful. Would not be surprised at all if he misses this game. And then offensive tackle Kent Perkins, defensive end Pete Robertson, a couple of starters. They've been limited at practice, but both are expected to play.
That's our top story, brought to you by Yellow Dog Brewing. Yellow Dog Chase My Tail Pale Ale, 473 ml 4-packs on special for the month of July. Look for it on sale at private and government liquor stores.
Wally Buono is going into the Stampeders Wall of Fame. And you may say, wait a second. He hasn't been associated with the Stampeders for more than 20 years. Like, what took them so long? The answer, Wally. And if you know Wally, he, he doesn't mind having a say, a little bit of control.
He told them not to?
Wally told the Stampeders years ago. Because, Blake, if I'm not mistaken, I think I believe they made an overture like within a year or two of him coming to Vancouver and the Lions. We want to put you in the Wall of Fame. And Wally said to them, guys, I would not feel comfortable going out and getting an honor like that. And then when it's done, going over to the BC Lions sideline and coaching the team and hoping to beat the Stampeders. Just Wally thought that would be a little bit awkward.
Well, he's been off the sideline for a while. Though.
Well, COVID.
Okay.
So anyways, so some of this, in fact, a lot of this is on Wally. Wally said, no. Like, wait till I retire, give it some space, let it breathe.
He would have literally said the word no, because he loves to.
No. He doesn't like the premise of your question. He doesn't like the direction the conversation is going. That's what you get. And then you shut up and Wally talks and you learn. That's how it works with him.
Favorite Wally Buono story was Trevor Martin's driving him home. For some reason, needed a ride home.
Oh, no.
We were going to call him.
We did a Wednesday. So we used to do Wednesdays with
the long form interview,
which was the long form full hour interview with a newsmaker.
Mm-hmm.
So he retires this time for good. And I said, well, Coach, we want you in to say goodbye, like a proper full length, no question left unasked, no nothing that you want to say to Lions fans, CFL fans unanswered. Can you come into studio for an hour? And of course, it's Wednesdays with, so it had to happen on the Wednesday. And he says to me, Matt, I'd love to do it. The only problem is Sandy and Christy have a big event that night. I'm not going to have a car. And
they dropped him off, but they couldn't drive him
So
home.
we thought we might have to pick him up. I said, Wally, just grab a cab. We'll take care of it. And then all of a sudden it was, no, they can drop me off, but I can't get home. I said, okay, coach, we'll send you in a cab home. And then T-Mart, who was the program director at the time, says, I can take Wally home.
He has, to this day, never been coached more from the passenger seat.
That's right.
Than that trip home, where the most evident routes were coached.
I don't remember if this was in the era where you could just plug in where you're going and get the.
I don't think it was quite as good as it is now.
No, it wasn't. I don't think it accounted for traffic back then.
Yeah, but T-Mart knows what it's like to be a first or second year player on the BC.
Oh, for sure. Wally coached him up all the way to the doorstep.
All
the way to the doorstep. Oh, we've had some good times with Wally over the years. Because to this day, I have never met a coach or general manager who is so willing. And Rick Tocchet is fantastic at this. Rick is high up this list as well. A coach or a manager who is so willing to engage in the debate, the dialogue, the issues of the day. Like we used to sit in Wally's office when I was writing for the Globe, because he would do his media session in front of the television cameras out on the field. And then usually Lowell Ulrich, Mike Beamish, myself, sometimes Ed Willis, whomever else would go sit in Wally's office. And Blake, like I'm talking 45-minute to an hour-long sessions where oftentimes it was Wally asking us the questions. And the number of topics covered, the breadth of topics covered, Blake, in those sessions was incredible. Like politics, religion, like you name a topic, food, you name a topic. At one point, we've all had a sit-down session with Coach on it. Those of us who covered the team. So it comes as no surprise, and this is going around here today, it comes as no surprise that when asked here, and I see Farhan has talked to him, that when asked, hey, Wally, if you were CFL commissioner for a day, what would be, or CFL commissioner, what would be the first thing you do? And Wally said, CFL or U.S. expansion. What do you think?
He's always been a proponent of this, and it's always been fascinating for me because as just a CFL in the blood kind of guy,
and a Canadian too,
yes,
right? Like,
yes,
that's the thing. Wally Buono's the all-time leader in coaching wins for a Canadian, well, for anybody, but the next Canadian on the list is the late great Cal Murphy, Vancouver's own, who got 99 career wins. Like Wally's north of 200. So this has not been a league that has seen a preponderance of Canadian head coach. Now, Mike O'Shea's there now doing a great job in Winnipeg, but
as a result, though, I would have thought that he would have been far more protective of the true Canadiana of the Canadian Football League and not think that U.S. expansion was ever going to be on the table. But he has always said it was just done wrong last time.
Correct.
If done right, it could be a lifeblood for the league.
Well, the way it was done last time, and you're going back to the 90s here. Actually, Ed Willis wrote a terrific book on this,
yes,
End Zones and Border Wars. It was done basically because the CFL needed the money.
Yeah.
The CFL needed expansion money. The CFL needed U.S. television money. The CFL was in a pretty bad place. The Saskatchewan Roughriders were holding telethons. You might remember that, Blake. The Ottawa Roughriders folded after 120 years in 1996. The Montreal Alouettes upped and finally moved to Baltimore, ending that tradition. So it was desperate times for the CFL. And it's funny because 20 years ago, when the infamous Lonnie Gleiberman made his return to the CFL, of course, was with the Ottawa and Shreveport franchises, and then came back to the Ottawa franchise. I was talking about U.S. expansion. I used to have a lot of debates with him. Oh, it didn't work, blah, blah, blah. I have come around on U.S. expansion for a number of reasons. And one is, now look, if you told me the people in Halifax got their shit together, got a stadium together, and we could have a truly coast-to-coast Atlantic to Pacific League with a wonderful Labor Day bookend where the Lions and Halifax team could play each other, and so it would be a full rivalry weekend, then that would be my preference. But if Halifax or a Maritime team is not going to come to be, then I damn well want a 10th franchise in this league. Like, I thought the Red Blacks coming in when they did really breathed some more life in the CFL as a 9th team. The crowds were great there. The energy atmosphere was fun. They made some Cinderella runs. They won a Grey Cup. It just felt like, it felt right. It felt like, yeah, the league's on the move here. I think a 10th franchise in the right city with the right ownership group would do that again. A redux.
To me, the biggest impediment to ever dreaming big again on U.S. expansion in the CFL is the name of the league. And I don't believe in my heart of hearts that a U.S. market is going to fully, for a decade or more, buy into a team in their city that belongs to the Canadian Football League.
Because for the most part, CFL is a punchline in the U.S. And as we have seen, particularly this week in Milwaukee, the Americans have never quite seen outside their borders well to begin with, and it's now a narrower.
If it was the NAFL
view,
if it was the Northern Football League,
Canada's foreign. Remember, Blake?
Yeah.
I
don't think that. And Baltimore supported.
Baltimore bought in
big
after
time.
They lost the Colts. Right, there was a football Jones there, and Baltimore
but
supported.
Still,
right.
we never saw that 10 years later. What would that look like? You know,
and frankly, to this day, that Stallions team that won the Grey Cup over Wally's Stampeders, not the one that lost here to Louis and the Lions. That Baltimore team is still the best CFL team I've ever seen.
Isn't one of the new USFL teams named after one of these US expansion teams? I think one of them is.
Could be. Is it San Antonio, or are they called the Texans?
I forget. But
let me ask you one thing, because Farhan's actually struck a poll on this at Farhan Lal GTSN. Which market should they expand to if they expand to the U.S.? So let me put this in your pipe. Portland. Loves weird, right? Hugely jumped on the soccer bandwagon. It'd be less snark, more adoption of the 12-man, 3 downs, Rouge, larger field. There's no NFL there, and their NFL ain't coming anytime soon to that market. What do you think? Your competition is the Trailblazers, the Timbers, and of course, I'm not even sure Oregon State will be competition anymore without a conference, but the Ducks down the road in Eugene.
So it's Timbers as the most schedule adjacent competition. Obviously, the Trailblazers will be starting up as you're finishing, but you're finishing. That's a good time to have that competition.
Yep. Because that's the biggest team in town.
Yeah. It's the Birmingham Stallions, by the way.
Okay.
Knew it was a B.
But Baltimore.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, I think it would be interesting to see that experiment, but again, and remember, there's a lot of Stars and Stripe Oregonians just outside of Portland. Portland's very progressive itself, but as soon as you get outside the coast,
well, that's the case. That's the case throughout the U.S. But every city votes Democrat.
But I'm saying those football lovers. I'm sure there's a lot of football lovers in that group outside of the Metropolitan. But are they going to drive in to see a Canadian Football League?
Yeah,
I
don't know. To me, that would be the one.
And I don't think that
unless you're willing to go to smaller cities and sort of name it after a state. You know, unless you're like for example, let me
Idaho.
just throw out Montana.
Yeah, Montana,
Okay.
Idaho.
Montana's got 2 university football programs. Montana State, Travis Lulay went there, and the Montana Grizzlies, Dave Dickinson's alma mater. Both are pretty well supported. But they're not the first tier of U.S. college football. There are facilities there. Would you throw a team in one of those towns, call it a state team, play your games on the weekends, hope that people in the summer congregate there?
North Dakota.
Something like that. Yeah. That would be, if you're not going to a bigger metropolis area, that would be the other thing that
But is there a commercial viability for some of those?
Well, I mean,
not
the
big
television
cities.
market doesn't do much for you in the U.S., right? Because you are on U.S. television, the CFL.
As it is, yeah.
Yeah, so it's not like it's going to drive bigger numbers there, but it balances you out as a 10-team league and makes scheduling more easy, right? It gives you a fascination. It gives you a footprint in the United States, and it's going to bring some money in by way of expansion.
The CFL is healthy right now, fairly healthy right now.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think they would ever revisit A, renaming the league, or B, going to 4 downs?
Not. No, absolutely not.
On
no,
both fronts.
and no. So no on renaming the league. You have a 100+ year tradition.
Mm-hmm.
It's got great brand equity across the country, right? I know there are a lot of haters, but we used to get the question, why are you guys talking CFL? Who cares? The answer: millions of people, because the CFL still does really good numbers on television, like numbers that a lot of leagues, that a lot of other programs, non-sports, would die to get.
So an MLS broadcast on TSN doesn't do anywhere near what a CFL
not anywhere
does.
close.
Yeah.
They're lucky to do. Heck, if they did a fifth of the CFL game, they'd be jumping for joy. It is apples and oranges in terms of a television property. The CFL and MLS. Secondly, Blake, and we've had this discussion before. The moment you go to 4 downs is the moment you encourage the running game.
Mm-hmm.
Is the moment you encourage, as Carmen always says to me, why do they run in the middle when it never works? 3 yards in a cloud of dust. So you lose some of the flavor of the league, of it being a passing league and a wide open league.
Yeah.
Now, it may well be that the coaches still see the width of the field and go, no, we're going to be a passing-based offense. But the second you go to 4 downs, you encourage the running game to a point where, let's face it, the CFL has to differentiate itself from the American 11-man game, and its successes, both in terms of being a television property and getting butts in the stands, is because for the most part, people will be entertained. I remember years ago when I was starting my career back in Toronto, I think it was in the Blue Jays press box, no less. One of the veteran reporters told me that they once took a poll of every sports media person they knew in the city and asked them, bang for the buck, if you're taking your family to a game, where are you taking them? And the overwhelming response was an Argos game. And of course, the citizenry of Toronto didn't want any part of being at an Argos game.
No.
But the sports media people were like, it's a reasonably priced ticket. I know I'm going to be entertained because the ball will be thrown all over the yard. There'll be big plays. There'll be kick returns and all that. So, no, I don't think you're going to 4 downs. And I don't think you're changing the name CFL. Of course, if you go to the U.S., because of the U.S. labor law, you cannot enforce the ratio. So it'd be an all-American roster.
As we saw with Baltimore.
Yeah, pretty much mostly all-American roster. Anyways, we'll see if that gains any traction, because let's face it, Randy Ambrosi and the move towards global players, that was done in consideration of, if we can just, piece together, tiny pockets of viewership and interest across Europe and Australia and elsewhere, then in aggregate, that gets us further ahead in terms of audience size. You would think that U.S. expansion, follows the same logic to some degree, right?
Maybe you can incentivize the U.S. team for every Canadian player you get to go $100K over the salary cap or something like that.
Yeah. Boy, now I'm talking like Wally, right? Caps versus the Houston Dynamo, BC Place, 7:30 Saturday night. Talked to Vanni Sartini yesterday. Interesting nugget on Javane Brown. We're going to get into that in a second. But stakes for Vancouver cannot improve on fourth place in the MLS West, their current standing, as we've talked about. Real Salt Lake and the LA teams, there's a little bit of a gap there, so it's going to be a hunting exercise for the Caps if they can keep the winning up. Could slip to as far as seventh place with a loss, depending on what the teams around them, the chase teams around them, namely Colorado, Seattle, and Portland do. They would still have games in hand, though, and so still in pretty good stead. I don't know if you have any lineup notes here.
Only that it doesn't sound like Matias Laborda is ready to go. He's got an ankle knock, suffered the other night. So who's at right center back is going to be interesting.
Well, it won't be Javane Brown.
No, and that would have been the option. That would have been the play.
You asked Vanni the question yesterday if he's going to play again for the Caps. And I saw the Glass City account picked up on our interview and said, and Vanni mentioned there's interest from other clubs. Glass City moving him would free up a senior roster spot and an international spot, but wouldn't clear much cap space. We are in a transfer window. Of course, you can make MLS trades, right? It's not always having to import a player from South America or Europe or whatnot.
Yeah.
What do you think? Is there a possibility of a Javane Brown trade sometime?
Yeah, I think there absolutely is.
What would you want? A replacement, someone who can play the spots that Javane plays, or would you?
I think they're looking to sign a player like that.
Okay.
I don't know if Javane Brown. I mean, I would love to. If I'm the Whitecaps, I would love to relieve CF Montreal of this terrible Matthew Choinière burden that they have.
The Canadian.
Now it would be Javane Brown plus to get Matthew Choinière. But
it's a Quebecer who doesn't want to play in Montreal. Huh?
Yeah, there's some issues there.
Well, it's a bit of an erratic franchise. CS Montreal. The owner is quite emotional, and
the turnover in the front office has been great. So
yes.
I think that's probably at the root of it all. But yeah, I mean, I would think that a lot of these deals will have to start to have some momentum. Although, as it's been told to me, for Major League Soccer clubs, these deals are often very last second. Mm-hmm. And, you know, like they are up against the end of the transfer window, most notably, and often come together at the last second. So we'll see.
Yep. The 152nd Open Championship from Royal Troon in Scotland, where Tiger Woods finished up this morning, 3-time Open champion. Massive ovation from the gallery as he walked up to 18. Blake, he tried to muster a smile and couldn't really eke one out. You can tell he was either disappointed or embarrassed or a combination thereof after 79 and 77, 14 over. I mean, Colin Montgomery was right. He doesn't seem to be having any kind of fun out there. There doesn't seem to be happiness. And yet, Blake, I do think he's still bringing joy to some of the fans. Certainly the fans that are there on the ground, being able to see him live and in the flesh. Maybe that's enough to continue going forward. This year for Tiger, 5 events, 3 missed cuts, withdrew from 1, 60th at the Masters, good for $44,000 in earnings over 5 events in the PGA calendar. It is a long way to the Masters in April, and Tiger has some time for introspection here. He said he's going to play the Hero World Challenge, of course, the silly season event that he sponsors. But that belief about still being able to win, and I don't know, and this was part of the problem way back in the day, but I'm not sure, and particularly after Earl passed, I'm not sure if there's anyone in Tiger's life that can sit him down and sort of speak truth to him.
Now,
because
I'll say this.
Not playing and turning up at majors and thinking you can compete, that's not a strategy. That's a hope bet. And the worrisome part about that is he says he's getting better physically, and yet still that's the case, Blake.
He didn't look great. But if you look at the leaderboard and the way down, of course, he's tied with one of the players of the moment in Sahith Theegala.
Yeah,
who's
Theegala is an American who hits a high ball, hasn't played a lot of Open championships, and is taking his lumps playing links golf on a blustery day.
He's two back of Smith, McIlroy, and Kim.
Right.
Like a lot of players are taking.
Yeah, two Open champions there too.
A lot of players are taking it on the chin right
for
now.
For sure. I'm not saying for a second that like 14 over sounds worse than it is when you look at this.
That's more my point. Yeah. And again, he is not the Tiger Woods of old by any stretch of the imagination. But as we talked about before, and Els and Daly pulled out, for instance, him playing out the string here, if he wants to, I've got no problem with it.
No one should have a problem with it. But what I'm trying to say is the Tiger psyche. Look, his two greatest comparables are Arnold Palmer and Jack Nicklaus as superstars of the sport that transcended. Arnold Palmer was a showman. He loved interacting with the gallery and the crowds. Famously returned every letter that was sent.
There was value added on top of the participation.
So Arnold Palmer, when he got too old to compete, was still absolutely delighted to be out there, laughing, smiling, joking, making fun of himself when he hit a poor one, entertaining the crowds. That was enough for Palmer. He knew he wasn't going to compete. He was A-okay with it. Jack was a little different. At one point said, more intense. Didn't want to be a mascot. Didn't want to be ambassador. Didn't want to be ornamental. And yet still played deep enough into his career that it was, okay, Jack can't compete anymore. He got a little bit more self-deprecating, that sarcastic wit of his, enjoyed the galleries a little more, and then called it quits.
Was he 43 or 48 when he won the Masters?
46 when he won the Masters. Yeah.
So just a little bit younger than where Tiger is now.
Yeah. Although in better physical condition.
Not in terms
he wasn't limping around.
No, but he was overweight and not lean.
Back then, a lot of golfers who were overweight. And it was briefer with Jack.
Yeah.
He had his fill with that pretty quickly in comparison to Palmer, who played really late, all the way up to 94. I have trouble seeing Tiger suffering a lot of that going forward. Like right now, he says he still thinks he can win, and I believe that. Like I believe that Tiger believes in Tiger. I also think there's probably a stubbornness and a competitiveness there that will keep that opinion fueled. But I think when that opinion changes, Blake, I think he's peacing out.
Yeah, but he knows what he feels in terms of his own game. Like we've all had those games where you're like, I played really well today. Why am I right on my normal score? Like sometimes it's unjust. And if he feels he's actually starting to trend better, it's just not on the scorecard yet. I can hear that. And, but I would think that something needs to give on the scorecard sometime soon. He needs to be proud of his scorecard sometime soon.
There's no pride right now.
Now,
maybe one of the Thursday or Friday round at the Masters this past year. Maybe he feels good about that, but this season I don't think contributes. It was a 72 on the Friday at Augusta, so even par. 72 in the first round of the PGA Championship. 73 the second round of Pinehurst, which was pretty good given how tough that golf course was. But I'm not sure. There's not a single round in the 60s this year, Blake.
No, that's problematic.
That's where I do think the totality of this, the compounding of this, if this continues, I think that at some point brings a pretty abrupt end to the notion that Tiger's going to play much more golf on the PGA Tour.
The good news is for us as viewers, this is playing like a true old style Open Championship right now. This is a tough tournament. Yesterday in the opening round, 38% of the people that teed off on the postage stamp were in a bunker. More than a third of everybody that teed up.
Yeah. Well, they're playing threesomes.
Right. So one of
on
every
average, one of the three guys you watch tee off there is in the
You're just looking at each other going,
Yeah.
who of us is going to be in the bunker? Because somebody is. Min Woo Lee tweeted out today.
This is good.
So if people don't know, this is in his own words, Min Woo Lee. So if people don't know, there's a person that follows each group raking bunkers at the Open. But on 8, postage stamp, there is a specific guy who does it. I feel bad for the fella. His arms are about to fall off. Sorry from the pros out here, plus me. So some self-deprecation there from Min Woo Lee. Guido Milozzi entered the 8th hole 3 shots above the cut line. He got into the big pop bunker, the big one. It took him 3 to get out of it.
Yeah.
He's now on the cut line.
Is that the coffin bunker? One of them is called the coffin bunker appropriately.
And so his whole tournament just blew up.
Yeah,
there.
of course. Well, and that's one of the charms of the Open Championship, if you will, or others would have other words for it. I'm sure competitors would have other words for it. Another one of the charms, you tend to see guys come from out of nowhere at this tournament. Todd Hamilton was back there this year. It's a surprise winner. Ben Curtis, once upon a time. An elderly Darren Clark, if you'll remember. This guy, Daniel Brown, 6 missed cuts and a withdraw on the DP World Tour before his 60th at the Scottish Open last week. He's tied for second place, 500. Played really good golf today. Played an awesome round yesterday, and then followed up with a really good round in tough conditions today. And so he's right there behind Shane Lowry, but so is Justin Rose. And wow, what a story this would be. Justin Rose, after being a top 5 player in the world, after being England's Rose, guy who pitched in right on the 72nd hole at his first Open Championship to the delight of a nation or a kingdom. He had to qualify for this Open Championship. He's -5, tied for second, poised for a weekend run, trying to be the first Englishman to win this championship since Nick Faldo. You have to go a fair ways back.
He birdied 2 of the last 3
sure did.
to get back to 500.
He sure did, and wow, was the crowd with him.
Yeah.
So, I'll be rooting Justin Rose on the weekend.
It's a great story.
It's an incredible story.
Right there. Although Corey Connors, if Corey Connors has a good moving day tomorrow, I think he needs to go mid-60s. I think he needs to put up a 67 sort of thing. But if he can do that, he's right in it as well. So otherwise, Corey's starting to be the KJ Choi, Canadian KJ Choi.
Yes. Competitive in majors.
Always top dozen or so, but never
not
really
a
in
threat to win.
Not really in it. Come on, Corey.
You were filling out Masters pools 20 years ago. KJ Choi was automatic.
Guaranteed.
Write him in. He won guys money.
Yes.
By going -7 T7. Right?
Totally. Yes. Every single time it felt like. My goodness.
Before we get to today's menu, we have a little bit of a show announcement here. Excuse me. So next week, we're going down to 3 shows a week. And I know some of you would be disappointed. I've heard from Jay and others, regulars who go, love that you guys go every day in the summer. And we have been going every day in the summer for the last several years. But we've made the editorial decision. It's going to be Monday, Wednesdays, Fridays for the next several weeks. And then we'll see where we go, late August sort of thing. But next several weeks, at the minimum, it'll be Monday.
But it's still new content.
Friday. Oh, yeah.
And
of course,
weekly for sure.
Canucks do anything large, we'll be right there.
Yeah.
Don't you worry.
Yeah. If they do something large on a Tuesday morning, we're not going to say, we don't have a show till Wednesday.
No.
We'll
hop to it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Everyone will be on notice. So let's get to today's menu. It's brought to you by Greta Bar. Greta, 50 West Cordova, a quick walk to the rink or stadium. Go-to spot for food, drinks, fun. The Bitchin' Arcade, check it out. Make it a game night at Greta. 50 West Cordova, gretabar.com. We'll talk to J-Pat here. on all the Canucks news this week. The Silovs re-signing and what that means going forward for him, for Thatcher Demko, for the workload in the Canucks crease. We're going to talk to him about Paterson and line mates. We'll talk to him about Boeser. And talk to him about whether or not he thinks this roster is done and set and ready to go for training camp. We'll also go to the people. To the people we go, our weekly mailbag feature on the podcast side where we take on your takes, questions, tell me I'm wrong, hot takes, and what have you. Time now for our Bet365 bets of the day. The segment brought to you by Bet365, proud partner Sekeres Price. Lions slot back Justin McInnes is coming off consecutive career games. 14 targets, 14 catches. I mean, a lot of receivers could play a lot of games for a lot of years and never do that again. So we've talked about previewing the game. Calgary head coach, former Lions quarterback Dave Dickenson, pretty smart cookie. In fact, very few CFL minds that I've covered in this league over the last 25 years that I'd say are smarter, more tactical, strategic than Dave. So he recognizes McInnes going to have to cover that guy and put measures in to try and limit the big Canadian. And I wonder if that means things are going to open up for the other guy, because it is a bit of a pick your poison scenario with this Lions offense and how well it's humming under quarterback Vernon Adams. I suspect if they focus on McInnes, big day for Alexander Hollins, going over 89.5 receiving yards for Hollins Sunday in Calgary.
I'm late to this. Am I missing something about the Riders roster this weekend? Are they
I haven't followed their practice week. Did they lose somebody important by way of
who's their starting quarterback this season?
Well, the starter got hurt. It was Paterson last week.
Yeah, it's Patterson again this week. So yeah. I mean, it could just be that that's the reason, but they're at home.
Yeah.
To the Winnipeg Blue Bombers.
And are underdogs.
They get, and this just, I got an extra point waiting an hour here. +5.
They're +5 now?
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, it's pretty tantalizing. Or on the money line is pretty good too at +185. Like,
by God, there they are.
Like,
did that line move pretty good? I thought I did not see it at +5.
It was +4 this morning.
Oh, okay.
And it's already +5. Jump on it.
Yeah.
Pretty tantalizing.
Yeah. I like that because our rival too.
Yeah, they're going to bring everything they've got. Yeah.
Open an account with Bet365 today. Bet on a huge range of markets. So whatever the sport, whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. Use code VANBONUS. J-Pat coming up next. Hockey season may be over, but it's always a great time at Greta.
Air hockey season is never over.
Right.
And at Greta, it's the best air hockey table around, but all the best games. So never mind waiting for somebody else to stage something in Vancouver for you this summer. You can stage your own thing. The fun is always there at Greta.
A quick walk to the rink or stadium. It's a go-to spot before the game, after the game. Make it a game night at Greta, 50 West Cordova, or at gretabar.com.
The Vancouver Canadians are back at the net. Catch fireworks, giveaways, and Friday nooners all spring and summer long. Get your tickets at CanadiansBaseball.com.
To you by the Arnold Palmer designed Whistler Golf Club. And what a 2024 season it has been already. Amazing reviews on course conditions and service. Group organizers, it is not too early to get your September, October corporate buddy trips booked. Prime time's filling up fast. And if you do so, you, the group organizer, plays for free. Tell us about your group at whistlergolf.com/groups. Here he is, our Canucks reporter, rink-wide host, Mr. Jeff Paterson. How are you?
I'm good. I was up at Whistler last week, and I can vouch for everything you just said there. Everything but the Bears. We didn't get the Bear experience.
You didn't get any Bears. Oh,
no Bears. But golf course in remarkable shape, and I think the 13th hole is my favorite hole up there. It's the dogleg left when you turn the corner and you get the vistas of the ski hill and the ski runs cut into the the mountainside. It's just spectacular stuff.
That hole kills me.
I have never played that hole well, but I hear what you're saying.
Yes.
From aesthetic point of view, that is absolutely a gorgeous spot on the golf course. Jeff, the big Canucks news this week was Artur Silovs re-signing as an RFA, a 2-year deal at $850,000, and that had us talking this week about goaltending duties and assignments this coming season. First of all, just your thoughts on the contract for Silovs, and then your thoughts on, what we should expect and what the Canucks should be asking of Silovs here this coming season.
I'm going to admit I was a little surprised at the dollar figure. Honestly, I thought for a guy that's played 10 playoff games, I thought that in and of itself might be able to drag this above the $1 million threshold. Like, he had no leverage. I understand that. So I wasn't expecting him to break the bank here, but the way the contract's structured as well, it's $800,000 in each of the 2 years with a $100,000 signing bonus. So there's not even a nod in the second year that if he has a big year here, he's going to be playing the second year of the contract at $800,000. It's an $850 hit because of that signing bonus. But I kind of thought just the trajectory that this guy is on, like maybe 800 in the first year and $1 million in the second year or something. Throw him a bone, but hey, it looks like the Canucks were prepared to grind, and they ultimately did. I know there were some out there that were worried about other teams pouncing on an offer sheet. It makes for great fodder every year. I mean, how much time have we all spent in this business talking about offer sheets, and they never come to be, really. So I wasn't too worried about a team swooping in on that. I just thought it was a case of he had no leverage. He understood he basically was going to have to take what they gave him, but I kind of thought that the number might be a little bit higher than that, because this is a guy that was a 6th round draft pick in the 2019 draft. I went and looked this up. Only 6 goalies from that draft class have touched NHL ice, and he's one of them as a 6th rounder, and he's got 10 playoff games on his resume already. And so just by comparison, it's always hard to sort of figure out where goalies are in their development, but Artur Silovs has 9 regular season games. He's played more playoff games than he has regular season games in the NHL. So that's a bit of a quirk in and of itself. But beyond that, he has 10 playoff games on his resume before Thatcher Demko had ever played an NHL game at the age of 23. So, apples to apples in that regard, just in where he is, the way that he's been able to progress through the ranks. Ian Clark had an eye on him, banged the table for the Canucks to draft him back in 2019. He saw something then, and I still think that Ian Clark sees something here now. And so to have the quality of goaltending that the Canucks appear to have at under $6 million for each of the next 2 years, like, giddy up, that has to be a competitive advantage for them almost every night out.
There's 2 questions or 2 purposes for Artur Silovs. One is to provide cover for Thatcher Demko, obviously, and rest for Thatcher Demko. But the other thing the Canucks are looking at there is there a goalie of the future there as well? Where do you think they are on that calculus? And, are the next 2 years here, maybe even the next 12 months, critical in that evaluation as Thatcher Demko finishes off his own contract?
Yeah, I think the next 12 months are massive for the Vancouver Canucks because, look, we don't see goaltenders traded at the trade deadline, right? Like, I think Ryan Miller might have been the last big-time goaltender that was traded at the deadline when he went from Buffalo to St. Louis, and that didn't work out for him very well, and then he ended up here in Vancouver. But you just don't see big-name goaltenders move at a trade deadline. So if goalies are going to move, it's most likely the offseason, right? And we saw that with Jacob Markstrom a couple of weeks ago. So just to follow sort of that train of thought, if the Vancouver Canucks, a year from now, they can enter into extension contract or extension talks with Thatcher Demko. If Demko stays on the trajectory he's on as a Vezina caliber goaltender for a second straight year, he's going to be asking for a massive raise, and so he should. Connor Hellebuck gets $8.5 million on a long-term deal in Winnipeg and is probably underpaid given the role that he plays for the Jets there. But I think, that's the sort of ballpark that you're looking at for an ace goaltender in the prime of his career. The problem is, even as the cap goes up, guys, and Brock Boeser is in this same conversation, you can't just keep doling out long-term contracts to every single player on your roster as much as you like them, as much as you drafted and developed them. Look at the Chicago Blackhawks through their 3 Stanley Cups. I mean, they kept changing. They built around a core, but pieces in and pieces out. Tampa to the same degree. You get good. These guys earn raises, and then hard decisions have to be made here. So I'm not trying to chase Thatcher Demko out of town. Please hear me when I say that. But a year from now, if Artur Silovs continues to develop, then yeah, I think the Vancouver Canucks are going to have a really difficult decision on their hands in terms of what do you do? You've tried to build this team into a contender. He's a core piece of that. He's done everything that you want in terms of, putting himself in the Vezina conversation, but can they afford to, dole out another big time contract to a guy in a key position? And so just be mindful of that, park that in the back of your mind. But I do think that is one of the storylines to follow here as this next season progresses.
We had asked earlier this week over under 27.5 starts for Silovs, about a third of the NHL calendar. I like the way you framed it in Canucks Army, in your Canucks Army piece. What's more likely, Demko starting 60 or Silovs starting 30? So what do you think in terms of usage, Jeff? Because you're the guy who brought us the theory, the backup goaltender, he's got to get you 15 wins or so during the course of an NHL season.
I think we're at a point in time, guys, and I hope that Thatcher Demko would subscribe to this as well, that the regular season just really doesn't matter for him. He needs to be healthy and available on day one of the playoffs, and I know that he was this time around and wasn't available on day two. And part of that was him working his ass off to get back and ready for those final two regular season games, and then got the one playoff game. They can't even contemplate the idea of 60 starts for Thatcher Demko. I'd like to see them cap it at a lot closer to 50, but we've seen it with Travis Green. We've seen it with Bruce Boudreau, and we certainly have seen it with Rick Tocchet as well. You got an ace in your bullpen. You're going to turn to that guy. And the Canucks are going to want to get off to a good start to prove that last season wasn't any sort of fluke and that they can pick up where they left off. And what's their best chance of doing that? Playing their number one guy and playing him a lot. And so, that's a bit of my concern, is that if they play Demko a bunch early and he plays well, then there's probably this sort of internal pressure to keep playing your guy. I think this organization, from management through the head coach and in concert with Ian Clark, like, they have to show some real discipline here. Get Silovs some early season starts. Let him continue to prove that he's an NHL goaltender. And he can build up his body of work here and build up his resume. And every time he's out, it's a night that Thatcher Demko isn't being forced to run out there and do what he does. So I'd love to see it closer to 50 and 32, but I think you guys were, that's a pretty strong balance in that sort of 55-27 kind of range. And of course, that all hinges on health. And look, with Thatcher Demko, that is now part of the conversation, whether he likes it or not. And I don't think he does like it, but it is part of his storyline. Can he stay healthy? Can he stay healthy to deliver? And especially when the Vancouver Canucks need him most, because to get the Edmonton Oilers to 7 games in the second round of the playoffs, and to do it on the back of your third stringer, if you had your number one guy at the top of his game, are you telling me that there wasn't a game in there somewhere that the Canucks lost that maybe Thatcher Demko wrestles away himself from the Edmonton Oilers? And so he knows how good he is. The team knows how good he is. But in order to prove all of that when the chips are down, he's got to be completely healthy and ready to go come postseason.
Yeah, Silovs was 8 out of 10, but Demko has the ability to go 10 out of 10 on a given night, and that could have saved a game. Yeah.
Jeff, you and Blake, you've mentioned this as well, the contract and how it came in and how friendly it is for the Vancouver Canucks. And Jeff, you mentioned grinding them and every last dollar. Well, there's good reason for that. As we saw this week with Puckpedia carving out the Canucks 23-man opening night roster, which includes Tucker Poolman. I mean, it gets you to $166,000 from the salary cap, which allows you to maximize or close to maximize most of the bonus overage with Poolman on LTIR. Has us wondering, is that it? Are they done? Do you think there's no more moves coming between now and training camp? And really a training camp where there won't be a whole lot of battles for jobs on the team, just positions within the lineup.
Yeah, my sense is that they are done, that we're not going to see any sort of splash from the Canucks between now and training camp. Now, that said, I'm well aware that in the second week of August last year, they found Pia Suter out there on free agency, and that turned into a terrific signing for them, not only last year, but to have him this year at $1.6 million, able to extract all sorts of value there. And I'm really curious to see how they utilize him. I do think that he's the best option as a third-line center this time around, but that you've got the fallback position if others don't work there with JT Miller and Brock Boeser. Yeah, he's a heady player, who just fits in seamlessly and can go about his business. So to get that sort of versatility on a guy at the price point they did, I mean, that was a terrific move in the offseason. Is there that kind of player lingering? There are still unrestricted free agents out there without a doubt. I think what's more likely for this group in their cap situation is to wait closer to training camp, where there are going to be some teams that feel the squeeze, and we may see some teams shedding salary, willing to retain. Beyond that, setting an opening night roster where maybe an NHL player shakes free that way and feels the squeeze. A guy that maybe a team doesn't think they can get him through waivers and they're willing to trade him at pennies on the dollar. I think those are more likely because, look, since Jim Rutherford took over, how many times have we heard him talk about wanting that cap on the cushion? They have a way better handle on their salary cap situation now than when they took over, without a doubt. And they have reallocated money into positions of need, and they've done a pretty nice job of that. But they're still bumping up against the cap. They don't have that cap cushion that Jim Rutherford has openly spoken about. And I know that they're a cap team and have been for a long time. And, you can say what you want about the ownership, but they're willing to write those checks so that this group can operate right up against the cap every single season. But last year in season, they were able to take on Nikita Zadorov. They were able to take on Elias Lindholm because they could fit those guys into the cap. Like right now, the roster looks decent. Like I'm encouraged. I'm excited. I like the free agents. I like the work that they did on July 1st. But if it's a good team and they want to make it even better, there are still needs on that roster. How do they go about addressing those? Because they're really not operating in a position where they've got a surplus of cap space. They have a little sliver of cap space that can grow if they accrue it over the course of the season. But if they want to, use that LTIR money and try and pick up a, $2.5-3 million player, sure. I mean, if the right guy's out there, I suppose. But I think it makes more sense. I'd like to see this group operate with that little cap cushion, as small as it is. And Alvin has talked about the fact that, last year they weren't able really to bring guys in from Abbotsford, guys that had earned an opportunity because they were just so up against it and dollar in, dollar out all the time. Like, I'd like to see them operate where they have a little bit more wriggle room, and that if some guys are pushing from the farm and deserve an opportunity, just even for a look-see, whatever the case, that would be my preferred way of operating, but they don't consult me on these matters. So ultimately we'll see how they go about doing their business this year.
The real lottery win would be trading away Tucker Poolman's salary, having that much space then, and having that expand as the season goes on so you can acquire an even better player come December. Isn't that the way to go?
It's certainly an idea that's been floated. For whatever reason, that hasn't happened. And there are other teams out there that could benefit from one of these players that, and it's unfortunate for Tucker Poolman. I mean, basically he's retired, right? Like he's not coming back at any point in the final year of this contract, and he's not getting another contract beyond this one. So terrible circumstances for him, sort of the forgotten man, out of sight, out of mind, and yet he lives on the books. And so, I mean, I know that idea has been floated about peddling what's left of his contract, and hey, maybe that's an avenue that they will pursue, but it's something that's been talked about for a while. It hasn't happened to this point. So I'm not convinced that it's going to happen, but let's see how things play out there.
Pettersson, we heard from him this week, Jeff. He spoke to his hometown Swedish newspaper. We have been talking about line mates for him and whether or not he needs to ascend to the number one center spot. Let's tackle that second one first. This time next year, do we need to be talking about Elias Pettersson as the Canucks' number one center now that he's an $11.6 million guy?
Well, before I answer that, I thought it was interesting. It sounds like he's a camp counselor back home in Sweden this week, running his own hockey camp. I wonder if his students are grilling him about his performance down the stretch and into the playoffs and the new contract kicking in. Look, you don't make that commitment to a player without expectations that he is going to deliver over the bulk of the contract. And so I don't know if it happens this season, because I still think JT Miller is very capable of backing up his 103-point season with something close to that. But at some point, there has to be a transition here. They didn't dole out the money they did to Elias Pettersson to have him be a second-line center. They believe in this guy. Players that get 102 points before their 25th birthday are few and far between. We've seen it from him. He's been a star in this league already. I think he's the kind of guy that you bank on, but that doesn't excuse for a second his performance down the stretch and into the playoffs. And it was pretty clear that the organization wasn't really buying what he was selling about the tendonitis in the knee. So I think they sent him away and basically said, get in the right headspace, come back and be prepared to dominate. And I do hope that we've seen this from him before, guys. Some strange things fuel him, right? But whatever it is, like if he perceives that he's being doubted in this market or around the NHL, or if he takes not being one of the first 6 guys named to Team Sweden for the Four Nations face-off, like if he took that as a slight, whatever, like if it can propel him to hit the ground running and get back to being the player that he was, not last season, but the year before when he got to 102 points, then I'm all for it. But yeah, I mean, he has to, at some point, sooner rather than later, he's got to become the number 1 center for the Vancouver Canucks.
Well, as you outlined, Jeff, the doubts are in his own organization. I mean, Rick talking and Patrick Alvin's response to the knee injury effectively amounted to, my words, not theirs, but you got to toughen up, kid.
Yep.
So that's going to be a most interesting dynamic to watch. What about line mates? We're told that DeBrusk is going to play with him. Who do you want to see on the other wing there?
I think I'd be prepared to start with Höglander, but I also know that Höglander was a healthy scratch in the playoffs. Like, just when you think that Nils Höglander has arrived and sort of erased some of the doubts about his all-around game in the National Hockey League, and then you get to the playoffs, and he underperformed in the playoffs, no question. I mean, nobody on that line of Pettersson, Mikheyev, and Höglander can look themselves in the mirror and say they did what they were supposed to do in the playoffs. But, look, 3 head coaches for Nils Höglander at the NHL level, and they've all sort of had the same concerns. From the hash marks down in the offensive zone, there's no question that there's a guy that can generate offense, but there are other areas in the game and on the rink, and I think he continues to have to work at those. But when I look at sort of on paper here in the middle of July as a depth chart, I think I'd be prepared to go into the season with Höglander, DeBrusk, and Pettersson, and then put Danton Heinen on the wing with JT Miller and Brock Boeser, and hope that that's your top 6. Now, is Danton Heinen, I'm not sure that he's a perfect top 6 player, right? But in a salary cap world, every team's going to have some warts somewhere along the line. And that's why I said earlier that if it doesn't work for Heinen, he's a pretty versatile guy. You can find other ways to utilize him, and Pius Suter can slide back in there with JT and Brock. So Vasily Podkolzin, a little bit of a wild card, obviously, but I'm just in the camp that I can't, from a guy that couldn't find any offense to his game down the stretch in the playoff games that he played, to think that this is going to be such a monumental offseason that he's going to come to camp and bang down the door to be a top 6 guy. Like, whoa, let's slow the roll there. Like, baby steps, work your way into the lineup and then take it from there. But yeah, I mean, I think that's how I would look at certainly their top 6. And I like the idea of Pius Suter between Garland and Joshua. I just think as much as Teddy Bluger had that incredible run with those 2 last year, Pius Suter is a better offensive player. He's got more offensive chops. He's got better production on his resume. And sure, Bluger was terrific in a short run there, but I think you're asking an awful lot to think that he can sort of find that lightning in a bottle again. And Teddy Bluger has settled into, he's got a role here, and he's going to have an increased role in terms of penalty killer and sort of taking on those hard minutes and all of that. So leave him be in that role as a 4th line center. I would like to see Pius Suter get a chance between Garland and Joshua.
Well, you got 2 options there.
He's a much better finisher.
You got 2 options, so you can go one way or the other. It doesn't sound like negotiations with Brock Boeser are really going to begin in earnest this summer, which puts some pressure on his start to the season, doesn't it? If they're not going to talk extension here over the course of the summer, all of a sudden the weight is on Brock's shoulders to back up the 40-goal season. How do you think he reacts to that kind of a pressure?
There's risk on both sides, because if he comes out of the gate and does what he did last year, and I'm not expecting 4 on opening night, but certainly that was a springboard for him in his 40-goal season. He got off to this incredible start. And the one thing with Brock Boeser is he scores in bunches. We saw that. He's had a 4-goal game. He had 2 hat tricks. I think he had 6 2-goal games. So he can jack his totals in a hurry with a couple of big nights along the way. I'm sure he'd like to have a couple of those nights early on just to get the feel and to sort of ease any doubts that he has or that people have about the blood clot. Training camp's going to be important for him just to show that he's completely healthy going into a platform year. Health has been an issue for him throughout his career, as we know as well. But look, this is a team that's in win now mode. He scored 40 for them last year. And this is a team that we've talked about needing more help from the wings. And now all of a sudden, this idea that, maybe he doesn't fit in to the long-term picture here. This one's going to be fascinating to watch, because is he the kind of player that's going to age gracefully, right? We've all doubted his skating. As he gets older and the league gets faster, is this going to be a guy that's going to be able to keep up well into his 30s? And I think that's a fair question. So we'll see how that goes. But it goes back to what I said about Demko. Like, at some point, as much as you like these guys, and they can all be fan favorites, you just can't go around handing out 7-year and 8-year extensions to every player. There has to be sort of that, crunch point. And I do wonder if Brock Boeser is going to fall on the wrong side of that with this management group. But again, you're in win now mode. If he's having a fine season, all of a sudden you're going to turn and pedal your leading goal. That one is hard to sort of square for me.
The Leafs are a good warning here. Like, you just keep keeping the band together.
Especially when the band hasn't done anything other than the second round.
Right. But it's expensive to keep the band together. And if you're not getting past the second round, it's maybe a sign that the band isn't that great.
There's the other, Saravelli talks about this all the time. Most Stanley Cup playoff series are a 50-50 toss-up.
Yeah.
Right? Just keep banging the door. Just keep getting there year in, year out. One of these years, it turns your way.
Boeser, just quickly on Boeser, look, Bo Horvat got the squeeze, right? And basically it took them a year, but they've taken Bo Horvat's money and essentially given it now to Filip Hronek. So it's not like, this is where I come back to this cap cushion. Like, at some point, you'd like to see them have some money in, there aren't any big contracts coming off the books. If you look at Puckpedia now, for next year, Brock Boeser is the big contract that would be coming off the books, and they're going to have a decision to make here on him. And we know that he's a popular guy coming off a 40-goal season where he sort of finally arrived in the National Hockey League. And yet I do think that this signal by upper management that, we're not even going to talk extension with him here in the offseason is this idea that if he doesn't get off to a good start, then his time here could be in jeopardy.
They may have to redeploy. Yep. Awesome stuff, Jeff. I know you're heading on a vacation. Enjoy that, and we'll catch up a couple weeks down the road.
All right, guys. Thanks.
Hey, everybody. If you're enjoying what you're seeing here, then follow along with Sekeres Price on YouTube. I promise more content coming.
The kids call it subscribe on YouTube.
Well, how about liking it?
Do that as well. Smash it right now.